So now we're going to take what we did in the previous video a step further, and we're going to automate it. And by automated, I don't mean that the server is going to launch automatically. We're still going to have to go to the EC2 console. But what I do mean is we'll automate all the package installation, installing Node.js, pulling down a Node source code from a GitHub repository, and getting it up and running and live on the web. Now, the way that we're doing this is actually the way that I go about automating things. I do them manually first so that I can understand the steps that need to be done and confirm that they do all indeed work, and then we script them. So what we're going to be doing this is exactly the same, except when we get to the configure instance details, with that user data script under advanced details, that's what we're going to change. We're going to put in a boot script. We're going to write a quick boot script, and that's going to be it. But we aren't going to have to log into the server. We're not going to have to install a bunch of stuff because our script is going to do that for us. So first up, I am over here in my shell. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to just call it userdata.sh. and .sh for a shell script, and then I'm going to open it up in my trusty Visual Code Studio. Okay, and so in here, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did in the server itself, but we're just going to turn it into a bash script. Instead of me coding out every one of the characters and leaving myself open to a typo, and that's pretty high chance, I'm going to just drop this in here, and then we're going to walk through and talk about it. Okay, so I've pasted the script in here, and let's just go ahead and walk through what's going on inside of it. The first thing, when you write shell scripts and you launch them in Linux, just quick aside, you need to tell the interpreter what is interpreting. Who's interpreting? Well, we're telling it bash is interpreting. And we do it in this way. This way makes the script a lot more portable because bash may not be available on the same path on every Linux distribution. But this is how we bypass that. The next thing should look pretty familiar. We're updating the packages. We're installing Node. Well, not installing Node. We're getting the ability to install Node, and then we're installing Node. However, you will notice some differences here. What happened to sudo? Why aren't we running this as the root user? Well, the reason being is that we are. When you run a user data script, it is run as the root user. So when you write a user data script and you give it to EC2, you assume that you are going as the root user because you are. So the second difference here is we're installing Git. The reason we're installing Git is because unlike in the last video where we scaffolded out a Loopback application, instead what we're going to do is just clone or pull down an application from a GitHub repository and use that. Now, in terms of what we're going to use, I just took what we did in the last video, I turned it into a GitHub repository and pushed it up. This is identical to exactly what we did in the previous video on the server. The only difference is I did this locally and I pushed up the source to GitHub. And so what we're going to do is we're going to clone this. We're going to download this, install its dependencies, and up this application. And again, this is just the result of running that LB tool and picking all those settings and have it creating all the files. So back over to the script here. Because we are just pulling down a repository and we're not using that loopback tool, well, we don't have a directory for it. So one of the things we need to do in our script here is make the directory. And since we're the root user, we need to make the directory for the EC2 user, the EC2 user that we're logging into. So that's all that this does. It makes the directory app, and then it just cds into it. And then we run the git clone command to grab the source code from GitHub. After we have that source code in our app directory, we're going to install all the dependencies, change the IP table to redirect port 3000 to port 80. And then finally, there is one thing down here that's different. We're running the node command, but just so we can have some logs and see what's up, we're going to pipe the standard logs to standard out .log file. We're just going to create a file for the standard out, and we're going to create another log file for the standard error. This way we'll have the log files for both normal logs and errors right on the server. So if we want to take a look at them, we'll have the ability to do so. Okay, so even though we've got this script in here, I just wrote this in here because it's a lot cleaner than looking at me putting it in and walking through it in AWS's little text boxes. So I'm in the EC2 console here. So just in AWS under EC2, and I'm in the instances page, and our third instance is still running here. I'm going to go ahead and click launch instance. And for launch instance, we're going to stick with Amazon Linux 2 AMI, T2 micro. Everything up here is going to stay everything up here is going to stay the same and not change. But we are going to click on advanced details. And under advanced details, as text, we're going to just paste in exactly what we just did. Let me expand the text box here so we can double check it. Yep, everything looks good here. All right, and just so you know, the majority of your DevOps bugs will probably be typos and forgetting very small details. So that's why I always check this stuff. And so in storage, that all stays the same. Tags, we'll give it another learn EC2, name, fourth instance. Configure security group. We're going to do the exact same thing we did in the last one. I'm going to just copy to new and name this one fourth instance, SG. Leave the rules as is, review and launch. And I'm going to just select the same key pair again so we don't have to go through that whole process again, and launch the instance. And so in doing so, what's going to happen is this isn't just going to launch the EC2 instance. Instead, it's going to launch the EC2 instance and run that user data script we just put up. And again, it's going to run it as the root user. And that script, as we know, is going to do everything we did on our third instance here. So the fun part about this is once this is done, we'll be able to grab the IP or the DNS and go to it in the browser and see the application live. Alrighty, looks like my fourth instance is up and running. Why don't we go see if it did what it was supposed to do? I'm going to grab the IP address. I'm going to put it into my browser, and what do you know? There is the Loopback server. If we go to Explorer, we'll see that the Explorer is up and working. I'm going to just try and get a user here just to intentionally make it throw an error, and then leave it at that, just so we can see what's happening in the logs. Okay, so that is up and automated and running. Pretty neat, huh? The way that script works is that, so let me hop back over to it here. You can swap this out here, this line, with any GitHub repository in which the command node dot will start the server. So in this repository, node dot does indeed start the node server. But in some GitHub repositories, maybe the start command is npm start. Well, if that's the case, you would just change the command right here to that. So just a heads up, but I wanted to show you how this could be reusable. Okay, and one more thing, let's take a look at these log files, because if you are using this and you do have people going to it, maybe for like a test project, or you're just testing out a feature that maybe due to launch or something in another release, and you just want to show your project manager real quick, but you do want to see logs. Maybe they went to it like I just did. Maybe you were like, oh, hey, I just upped the feature that we're working on. Will you take a look at it? Here's the public IP address. And they came over here and they clicked get.users and saw this nasty error. And instead of them telling you, hey, there's this error 401, they've just told you, oh, it's broken. I don't know what it is. Go figure it out. Well, how would you figure out the logs here of what's going on? Well, that's the intention of this last line here. It pipes the logs to these two files. And to get to them, we need to get into the server. So over here, I've got the fourth instance selected. I'm going to grab the IP. And over in my shell, I'm going to SSH into it as the EC2 user. Yes, I'm okay with that. And in our home directory, if we type ls, look at that, we'll see our app directory. If we go into the app and type ls, we'll see these two files here, standard error.log and standard out.log. And if we do a cat, so just concatenate standard out.log, we'll see, oh, there's those logs, the default, hey, we're listening. But if we do it for the standard error, oh, there we go. We see, looks like our product manager had the error of authorization is required and they just didn't log in. So now you get to send a snarky email to your PM saying, hey, you should log in. Okay. I'm going to make sure that this script, this reusable script, is available to you below the video. And I also have some instructions under the video on how to make this reusable for any node-based project. But the beauty of this is, again, this is something now you can go take and use however you'd like to. Now, this isn't just something that will work for node-based projects. I mean, it will only work for node-based projects. But the way you go about using this for like Python or Ruby or a different language or a different source code is the same thing. Install your dependencies, get the source code, install those dependencies for the source code, and then just start it. Just start the server. And if you want to redirect to 80, you can just use this line. Now, I do want to say again, this is great for, hey, we need to test something quickly. Hey, let's show off this quick feature and whatnot. But the limitation, of course, is that we are not setting up SSL or anything like that. But hopefully you're aware that that is far beyond the scope of this particular series.